Hi, everyone. This is Scott Nybakken for Dynamite Entertainment, and I'm here today with writer and cartoonist extraordinaire Jay Stevens to talk about his upcoming crossover title pitting the She-Devil with a sword against bug-eyed alien invaders. Red Sonja attacks Mars. Jay, thanks for joining us on the channel.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Hi, everybody.
So to begin with, I think this is your first project with Dynamite. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was curious how familiar you were with the worlds of Red Sonja and Mars Attacks before you signed on to write it. Did you have to do a lot of research on it, or were these franchises already part of like your pop culture database?
Well, I really do love any excuse to do research into the dustier corners of pop culture. I mean, uh, that is really fun for me. But yeah, um, I must have been 11 or 12 when I first read a short story collection of Robert E. Howard's, which included this creepy island story called "Shadows in the Moonlight."
Mm.
It's kind of a proto Red Sonja story too. There's a female protagonist as well, and that really stuck with me. It's actually directly referenced in issue 3 of the series. So yeah, you can see I'm kind of nerdy for that era of fantasy, the Weird Tales era. And as you can see over here, right there on my shelf,
Mm, yeah.
Norman Saunders, the original artist on the Mars Attacks trading cards, is like one of my all-time favorite pop artists.
Mm. Yep. Um, so you've had a long career as a storyteller in both comics and TV animation, but your comic size is somewhat unique in that you've been in the world of indie comics for almost your entire career. How has that experience informed your approach to this series, which is more of like a mainstream genre title?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been a bit of an outsider, I think, in the comics field. A little too strange for the mainstream and a little too pop oriented for the true underground cred.
Mm,
Uh, I have dabbled in mainstream and licensed work in the past. Like for Dark Horse, I did stuff for Aliens and Star Wars back in the day, and Teen Titans and Invisibles at DC. So I did play around with it, but I don't know. It seemed like my sensibilities weren't really a good fit at the time. I might have just been a little too strange or silly. Things have really changed. You know, I stuck to creating my own stuff for a while because I thought I knew um, what a. I remembered what I liked as a kid, and so I wanted to keep writing and drawing that stuff. But um, and it is weird that you can't get more mainstream than a Cartoon Network series, but
mm.
I never really got the gig until now. I think tastes have changed, and or maybe I was just waiting for the right crazy project.
And as you mentioned, like Red Sonja and Mars Attacks both started out as print projects, like the short stories by Robert E. Howard and the trading cards for Mars Attacks. But they gained up a lot of popularity years later as a result of their movie adaptations. Are you drawing on the film versions at all for inspiration in the new series?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Mm,
Again, I was probably exactly the right age, 11 or 12, when the Conan and Red Sonja films first came out in the early '80s. I'm old.
yeah. Oh,
And
I was there too. I was there
yeah,
too.
and they had a huge impact on me. I mean, I was a
Yeah.
fantasy fan already, and yeah, films in that era too, early '80s films. I mean, Big Trouble in Little China,
Mm,
Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. Uh, they had such a weirder anything goes attitude too. So
yeah.
not just those films in particular, but the that irreverence is something that I'm trying to reference as well. And it was around that same time too, when I was 11 and 12, early '80s, when the first Mars Attacks trading card reissues came out. So all of that stuff's all mixed right in there, hardwired in. And it should go without saying that I'm a child of Tim Burton as well.
Yeah. And like in your own comics, like Dwellings and Figgy. Furthermore, you've done both the writing and the art in the classic as the classic cartoonist style. How does that creative process differ when you're writing for another artist, as you're doing with Franz Strucan on Red Sonja Attacks Mars?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing both. there's a lot of creative freedom in writing for yourself. I mean, I know what I don't want to draw, so I can leave that stuff out of the script. I mean, I made poor Fran draw a pirate ship. You know, that's. But
A
I think
lot of
it's
artists like drawing pirate ships.
well, yeah. I hope he had fun. I think it's like being a singer songwriter that's also in a band sometimes. You know, I love the collaborative process. Um, I really like having somebody um, run with, like jam with, you know, my ideas and um, pull things off in a way that I didn't really imagine. I have a tendency to over describe things visually in my scripts. I can't help it. I'm kind of like thumbnailing a little bit.
Mm.
But as I always say to my artist collaborators, I'm like, you know, feel free to ignore it if you have a better idea. I think Fran is perfect for this crazy story. Um, the artwork is like really crispy and kind of poppy, but and you know, playing it straight a little bit, but has room for that dark humor, that sort of 80s weirdness.
Yeah, that like which like related to that, like the rhythm and pacing of a lot of your stories, particularly in Dwellings and Epitaphs from the Abyss, mirror the classic tales from Harvey Comics and EC Comics, but with a much darker sensibility. Does that kind of pacing translate well into the mayhem that the She Devil will presumably be visiting upon these big brained intruders?
Yeah, I like to think I was approached for this project for exactly those reasons. Um, you know, I clearly like to weaponize nostalgia in my projects.
Mm,
You know, going back to like rereading some Robert E. Howard and the flowery Weird Tales mid-century prose. I love that stuff, so I'm trying to work that stuff back in. This feels right up my alley. But then, of course, twisting it and reinterpreting it. Um, the story is, as I said, played fairly straight, um, with a good dose of black humor. Um, there's still lots of monsters and carnage, and yeah, it really is. I mean, honestly, the mashup is so strange to begin with. You know, it is and it isn't because you know the Martians aren't that far off from the Lovecraftian weirdness that was in all of Howard's work anyway. Um,
yeah.
but because the mashup of two pop culture icons is unusual to begin with, we just stayed with the strange. This is a callback to those insane '80s films I was talking about.
And without getting like too far into like spoilers or anything, can you give us a little bit of the setup for how the story begins?
Yeah, so really, it's a simple to get her into the story quickly. It starts with a battle with some serpent men. You know, we're
Mm.
starting strong, um, and her life is saved by a villager who she promises to avenge. And so it starts as a life debt that sets her on this quest to find the daughter who was kidnapped by the surviving snake men. And so that takes her on this epic journey. I love uh, the Hyborian world, and I wanted to take her across the map as far as possible in these
Yeah.
journeys. So we move her around a lot. Um, and it just there is a of course this is a sequel. Um,
Yeah.
there was a Mars Attacks Red Sonja series from a few years back. um, this is a standalone story, so if you haven't read that one, this one does, you know, give you all the basics you need, but it is in direct reference. So these are creatures she's seen before, and so the evidence she slowly starts to discover that the Martians are still on Earth leads her to gradually build a force to attack them.
Excellent. Finally, each issue of Red Sonja Attacks Mars will come polybagged with an exclusive trading card showcasing that issue's cover art. Do you have any of the original Mars Attacks trading cards in your presumably extensive media collections?
Oh, unfortunately, no. I have some of the reissues, but I had this is really sad, and my heart goes out to my Californian friends too, because I have been through something similar. I had a major basement flood years ago, and I
Oh
lost
yeah.
a lot of treasures,
Yeah.
including my original Mars Attacks cards. I hope to rebuild my set eventually. I love though that Dynamite is doing cards with this series. It's perfectly on point.
Yep. Well, Jay, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everyone for watching. Red Sonja Attacks Mars will crash land into stores this March, so make sure you pre-order it now. And be sure to follow Dynamite Comics on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X to hear more about all of our upcoming releases. Until next time, ack, 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 ack.
Ack, ack.